Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into something, well, fundamental and maybe a little unsettling. How our own minds can sometimes lead us astray.
Ah,
We're exploring these surprising ways we can miss things right in front of us, how we build memories that aren't quite right, and how we mess up figuring out cause and effect.
that's right. We've been looking through a bunch of sources, articles, some research notes that really get into these kinds of, well, let's call them blind spots in how we perceive things, remember things, and reason.
Yeah, pulling from some classic psych experiments, but also some pretty wild real-world examples.
Exactly.
So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack what these sources are telling us about how we think we process the world versus how our brains actually, do it.
Right? Why aren't we always as sharp or logical as we might believe?
And what does all this mean for you? What are the practical takeaways from these cognitive quirks?
Okay, so let's just jump in. The sources kind of break this down into three main ways our brains can, well, create these blind spots.
First up, they talk about something called inattentional blindness.
Right. The basic idea here is that just seeing something, like light hitting your retina, isn't the same as actually noticing it or being consciously aware of it.
Okay, so seeing versus seeing.
Precisely. And the classic study they mentioned, you've probably heard of it, Simons and Chabris from
Oh,
'99.
yeah, the gorilla one.
That's the one. They had people watch this video, basketball players passing balls around. Teams in white shirts, teams in black shirts.
And the task was just count the passes for one team, right? Like the white team.
Exactly. Keep track of the white team's passes. Seems simple enough.
But then,
But then, right in the middle of the action, while people are focused on counting, someone in a full-on gorilla suit walks into the frame.
just strolls in.
Strolls in, stands in the middle, does this little chest-beating thing for like 9 seconds, then walks off.
And the crazy part is,
The crazy part is, when they asked the participants afterwards, did you see anything unusual?
Mm.
About half of them, 50%, had absolutely no idea the gorilla was ever there.
wow, 50%, even though it was right there.
Right there, smack in the middle. It shows how laser-focused our attention can be, filtering out anything deemed irrelevant to the task at hand.
So their eyes technically saw it, but the brain just ignored it.
Yeah, pretty much. It wasn't an eyesight issue. It was an attention issue. And the sources give this amazing real-world example, too, the Joshua Bell story. Remember that?
Oh, the violinist in the subway. Yeah, tell us about that.
Okay, so this was back in '97. The Washington Post arranged it, even won a Pulitzer. They got Joshua Bell, like one of the most famous classical violinists in the world.
Playing a ridiculously expensive violin, right?
A multi-million-dollar Stradivarius. And he stands in a busy D.C. subway station during morning rush hour.
Mm-hmm.
Thousands of people walking past, mostly, professionals, government workers,
And he's just playing Bach, like incredibly beautiful, complex music.
for 43 minutes straight.
Oh, wow.
And the prediction was, maybe it'll cause a huge crowd, a bottleneck.
But that's not what happened.
Not at all. Out of over 1,000 people who walked by, only about 7 stopped for any length of time. A few tossed in some change. Most people just rushed past, barely glancing.
He was essentially invisible, the gorilla effect, but in real life.
Exactly. It perfectly illustrates that gap between physical seeing and conscious noticing.
And there was that other study mentioned, the eye tracking one, Heidelberg University.
Right. They did a similar gorilla test, but tracked where people's eyes were looking. And they found that even the participants who later swore they didn't see the gorilla, their eyes actually rested on the gorilla for maybe up to a second.
So the eyes registered it, definitely.
Hmm.
But the conscious brain didn't process the information.
Correct. It just didn't make it through the attention filter.
So why? Why are we wired like this? The sources mention evolution.
Yeah, the thinking is our cognitive bandwidth is, well, limited. In our evolutionary past, it was often way more beneficial to focus intensely on one critical thing, hunting, watching for predators, whatever.
A sort of single task mode for survival.
Right. Multitasking wasn't really the name of the game. But now, our world is just this constant flood of information, way more complex. We try to multitask, but that underlying focus mechanism kicks in and makes us blind to other things.
And it's not just us regular folks. The sources point out even pros struggle, like script supervisors.
Yeah, people whose entire job is to spot visual inconsistencies in movies, continuity errors, like if a glass is full in one shot and half empty in the next.
And yet, films are full of them. They mentioned The Godfather having like 40-something errors.
Over 40, yeah. Or Saving Private Ryan, a soldier apparently coming back to life after being shot. These are highly trained visual experts.
It's kind of mind-blowing. If they miss stuff like that, what are you, the listener, or what are we missing just going about our daily lives?
Makes you think, doesn't it?
Okay, so that's missing things happening right now. What's the next type? Memory blindness.
Yes, memory blindness. This one's maybe even deeper. It's not about failing to notice something. It's about how our memories themselves aren't perfect recording. They can be
Hmm.
reconstructed.
Reconstructed, like built differently than how it actually happened.
Exactly. Sometimes subtly, sometimes significantly. It's not just forgetting bits. It can be actively adding things that weren't originally there.
Huh. How does that work? They had an experiment for this, too.
They did. A pretty simple but effective one. Researchers read participants a list of words, maybe 15 or so. Words like bed, rest, awake, tired, dream, snooze.
Okay. All related to sleep.
Very strongly related. Then, a little later, they asked the participants to recall as many words from the list as they can.
And people remember some, maybe forget others.
That's right. Average recall might be around, say, 7 words. But here's the kicker. About 40% of the participants confidently include the word sleep on their list.
But sleep wasn't actually on the original list.
Nope, never spoken. But because all the other words are so tightly connected to the concept of sleep, the brain essentially fills in the gap. It reconstructs the memory as if sleep must have been there.
And people are sure they heard it.
That's the key. They aren't guessing. They often report a genuine memory of hearing sleep. It shows memory is this active associative process, not a video playback.
That makes the Hillary Clinton example they brought up make a bit more sense, maybe? The Bosnia trip story?
Right. From her 2008 campaign, she gave this dramatic account of landing in Bosnia back in '96 under sniper fire, having to run for cover into vehicles.
But then the news media found photos.
Yeah, photos and video emerged showing a pretty standard arrival ceremony. Greeted on the tarmac, dignitaries. She even kissed a little girl. No obvious sign of immediate danger or sniper fire in the visuals.
So the immediate reaction from many was, well, that she was lying.
And that's one interpretation, of course. But the sources suggest another possibility, rooted in this idea of memory blindness. Could it be that the general stress, the known danger of a post-conflict zone, maybe a story she'd heard, led her memory to reconstruct the event over time?
So, like the sleep example, her brain filled in details consistent with the overall theme danger, even if they weren't accurate for that specific moment. And she genuinely believed her version.
It's a plausible alternative explanation the sources raise. It doesn't excuse inaccuracy, but it suggests the mechanism might be this common cognitive function, not necessarily deliberate deception. People can have very strong, vivid memories of things that didn't happen exactly that way.
It definitely raises a huge question then. How much of what we remember vividly, confidently about our own lives might be, shaped or even partly invented by this reconstruction process?
It's a bit unnerving to consider.
Okay, so we've got missing things now, inattentional blindness, and misremembering things later, memory blindness. What's the third one? Causal blindness.
Causal blindness. This is all about how we try to figure out why things happen, connecting cause and effect. Our brains are wired to look for patterns and explanations.
Like event A happens, then event B happens, so A must have caused B.
Exactly. That's a fundamental way we try to make sense of the world. But the sources argue we're often quite bad at it, especially when things get complex. We make predictable mistakes.
Okay, what kind of mistakes?
Well, one big one is confusing simple coincidence with actual causation.
Just because two things happen around the same time doesn't mean one caused the other?
Right. The sources use the example of Hush Puppy's shoes becoming suddenly trendy in the '90s. Malcolm Gladwell wrote about it, suggesting their sort of anti-trend look was the key factor.
Okay. Plausible, maybe?
But the critique in the sources is, hang on, there were probably other shoe brands around then with a similar ugly cool vibe that didn't suddenly take off.
So maybe the Hush Puppies thing was just luck, or a bunch of factors we don't see, and pinning it just on the design is too simple.
Could be. The link might be there, or it might just be a coincidence or part of a much bigger, messier picture. We jump to the simple causal story too easily.
Got it. What's another mistake?
Another huge one is mixing up temporal sequence with causation. Just because B happened after A doesn't automatically mean A caused B.
Right, correlation doesn't equal causation, the classic line.
Exactly. But we fall for it constantly, especially in business, the sources note. Think about it. A company's doing badly, they fire the CEO, bring in someone new, a year later, sales are up.
And everyone says, see, the new CEO fixed it.
Right. That's the easy narrative. But the sources, referencing folks like Nassim Taleb, point out that performance in complex systems often has a degree of randomness. It fluctuates.
It's like a random walk. Things go up and down sometimes just per chance.
Precisely. Maybe sales would have gone up anyway due to market trends or just random variation. Attributing it solely to the CEO, change might be wrong.
They had a specific example for this too, right? Paramount Pictures.
Yeah, a really telling one. Sherry Lansing was CEO of Paramount. They had huge hits under her like Forrest Gump, Titanic,
Yeah.
massive successes. But then, later in her tenure, their market share started to slide. Down, down, down for about 6 years. Pretty significant drop. So the board decides, time for a change, and she steps down.
New CEO comes in.
New CEO comes in, and what happens? The very next year, Paramount's market share bounces back up. They have big hits like War of the Worlds, The Longest Yard.
Ah, so it looks like the classic new leader turns it around story.
Exactly what it looks like. But here's the crucial detail the sources highlight. Those hits, War of the Worlds, The Longest Yard, they were actually developed, greenlit, and mostly finished while Sherry Lansing was still the CEO.
No way. So the success that came after she left was actually based on work done before she left.
Largely, yes.
Right.
But because the success happened on the new CEO's watch, everyone attributed it to him based purely on the timing. It shows how easily we misread cause and effect based on sequence.
That's a fantastic example of causal blindness.
Right.
We see B follow A, and we just assume A caused B, even if the real cause was earlier or somewhere else entirely.
And this isn't just business. It applies to how we interpret history, political outcomes, social trends, anything complex. The sources mention Bertrand Russell's thought experiment.
Oh yeah, tracing industrialism back.
Right. You could trace it to science, then Galileo. But why Galileo? Maybe access to Greek texts after the fall of Constantinople? Why did Constantinople fall? Turkish migration? Why did they migrate? Maybe drought in Central Asia? Which links back to hydrology.
It just shows how ridiculously tangled and uncertain cause and effect chains can be. Our desire for a simple explanation often masks a much, much more complex reality.
Absolutely. We crave simple stories, but the world rarely provides them.
So how often, then, are we looking at events unfolding over time and just confidently drawing the wrong conclusions about what caused what?
Probably more often than we'd like to admit.
Okay, let's try to pull this together. We've talked about these three kinds of blindness the sources identify.
First, inattentional blindness, missing the obvious like the gorilla or the violinist, because our focus is narrow.
Then, memory blindness. Our memories aren't recordings, they get reconstructed, sometimes leading us to remember things like the word sleep that weren't there, or maybe even altering significant personal events over time.
And third, causal blindness. Our tendency to mess up cause and effect, confusing coincidence or simple timing with actual causation, like with the hush puppies or the Paramount CEOs.
And maybe these aren't totally separate. Like, if your attention misses stuff inattentional, that gives your memory faulty data to work with, memory, which then makes it even harder to figure out the real causes. Causal.
That's a great point. They could easily compound each other. It suggests these aren't just weird glitches, but maybe side effects of how our brains are fundamentally designed to focus, to narrate, to find patterns. Useful tools maybe, but ones that can definitely lead us astray in today's world.
The sources end with this really interesting legal puzzle, a hypothetical case.
Yeah, it's designed to really mess with your intuitions about cause and effect.
Okay, set it up for us.
All right, imagine a traveler asleep in the desert. Person A comes along, sees the traveler's water flask, and secretly puts poison in it.
Okay, not good.
Then, a little later, person B comes along. They don't know about the poison, but they want the traveler to die of thirst, so they puncture the flask. All the water, the now poisoned water, leaks out into the sand.
Oh, wow.
The traveler wakes up the next morning, sees the empty flask, has no water, and tragically dies of dehydration.
Okay. So who is legally responsible for the death?
Well, that's the puzzle. The sources lay out the potential arguments.
Person A's lawyer might say.
Look, my client, person A, tried to poison the traveler but failed. The traveler didn't die from the poison, they died from lack of water. So attempted murder maybe, but not murder.
Okay. And person B's lawyer?
Person B's lawyer argues, my client, person B, did deprive the traveler of water. But what water was it? It was poison water. You can't murder someone by depriving them of poison water that would have killed them anyway. So maybe he attempted something, but not murder by dehydration.
Huh. So A failed because the poison wasn't drunk, and B failed because removing poison water isn't technically the lethal act.
Exactly. As the sources say, it leaves you kind of bewildered.
Yeah.
It just perfectly highlights how incredibly tricky pinning down cause can be, even in a situation with a clear sequence of actions and a definite outcome.
Wow. Okay. So, bringing it all back. Given these different ways our brains can fool us, missing the obvious, rewriting the past, misjudging the why, how much certainty can we really have?
Right, in what we see, what we remember, why we think things happen in our own lives or in the world.
What might you be missing or misremembering or misinterpreting right now?
That's the question to ponder.